When we think of sin, we often conjure up ideas of thou shalt not, do this, do that, right? We know that we should not murder, we should not commit adultery, we should honor our parents, we should not steal. These are sins and they're obvious, and when we are participating in these, we know they're sins. Most of us have some things from the world that we need to clean up, and those are sins, and we get that. However, I have discovered a sinister sin that stays uncloaked, unperceived, until it drains the very life out of another person and the person that you said you would love, honor, and cherish. Welcome to probably one of the most interesting shows we will ever do here on Healing Time. I want to set the stage for you. For the past 35 years, I have been day in, day out counseling couples. I have seen a lot of success, but at times a marriage can die right in front of me in the office, and it's horrible. As I've watched these marriages, I saw something insidious. And it took me a while to find what was going on and put a name to it, especially a Christian name, because I never heard a teaching on what I'm about to share with you today. When we think of sin, we often conjure up ideas of thou shalt not, do this, do that, right? We know that we should not murder, we should not commit adultery, we should honor our parents, we should not steal. These are sins and they're obvious, and when we are participating in these, we know they're sins. We know that slander, gluttony, drunkenness, immorality, and any type of sins that most of us tend to address, probably early in our Christian walk. Most of us have some things from the world that we need to clean up, and those are sins, and we get that. However, I have discovered a sinister sin that stays uncloaked, unperceived, until it drains the very life out of another person and the person that you said you would love, honor, and cherish. This sin is what I call the sin of withholding. Now, it's obvious if you were hitting your spouse, raging, being abusive, calling them names, cursing at them, that kind of abuse is really obvious. You can see the bruises, or you can explain the abuse when you talk to your pastor or cell group leader or bishop. You can say, they're saying these things, they're hitting me this way, they pinned me down. Those are easy to explain to somebody. The sin of withholding is stealth. It's on the other side of the continuum of abuse. It's called neglect. The sin of withholding is actively starving your spouse of affection, praise, sensuality, and being disconnected in the relationship on a very regular basis. The spouse feels alone, deprived, confused, and they're begging for love from their Christian spouse. This sin is not bound by gender, age, religion, or any category I can think of. I've seen people from every continent, from every belief system, have this sin of withholding. And it's in a marriage. The sin of withholding shows up in what is known as intimacy anorexia. Now, intimacy anorexia is the active withholding of spiritual and emotional and sexual intimacy inside a Christian marriage. Inside that place where we said, Father, I will love, honor, and cherish, but then the doors close and the spouse feels alone, disconnected, unwanted, sometimes not having conversations about their heart, not having spiritual conversations, sometimes not having affection, romance, or even sexuality inside their marriage for weeks, months, or years, or decades at a time. So I want to cover the characteristics of intimacy anorexia, and I want you to pay attention, not just for yourself and just for your marriage, But I find that once we give this information to people, God will send you people who are struggling in this area, and you'll be able to give them an answer. So definitely write down the term intimacy anorexia, and you can Google that. There's a lot of information on that. But here's the characteristics. Your spouse stays so busy that they have no time just for you. They got time for church, they got time for the neighbors, they got time for family, friends. But you, we're not dating, we're not spending quality time, we're not sitting on the porch and just holding hands. Secondly, blame. They blame you for all the problems in relationship. Rarely does an intimacy anorexic say these words, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, it was my fault. If you're not hearing those, really pay attention to what I'm sharing. They also will withhold love, especially the way that you like to be loved. If you like to be touched, they won't touch you. If you like gifts, you won't get any, etc. They withhold praise. They might praise you in public, but at home, you're not hearing, you're amazing, you're wonderful, you're beautiful, you're handsome, I appreciate you. You're not hearing that. They withhold sexually, either by not having it or being disconnected during it, or suggesting that you're needy to ask for it. This is a very painful part of withholding because that's what part of marriage is about, that intimacy. They withhold spiritually. They might even be the pastor or deacon or Sunday school teacher, but they're not praying with you. They're not opening the Word of God with you. They're not worshiping at home alone with you. They might raise their hands in church, but they don't raise them at home with you. They can use anger and silence as a way to control in the relationship, to shut you down. And when I say silence, it can go on for days or weeks. They can have ongoing or ungrounded criticism of you. And it's constant, and it feels like they're picking at you. Especially when we get close, they'll push you away. They're unwilling or unable to share their feelings with you. I'm not talking about rage. I'm talking just being able to be honest with their heart with you with any consistency. They control or shame around money. Now that's usually a smaller one that may or may not be there. But often the spouse feels like a roommate. Now, if you have 5 or more of these in your marriage, or if someone you're talking to, or someone in your cell group says, hey, I feel alone in my marriage, I feel disconnected, we're not really functioning well, it's like we're like roommates, we're business partners. You hear those kind of phrases, that's what this show is for you. It's to equip you to say, oh, I know what could be going on. It could be called intimacy anorexia. Go look that up. Find out if that fits. We get emails and responses from all over the globe. This is a flesh pattern that is universal. And once you can see it, you can start to heal it. And that's what healing time is about. Seeing it, healing it, starting a group in your home or in your church to be part of the solution. We're not bringing this up to shame anybody. We're bringing it up to bring healing and awareness. So I want you to stay tuned, because when we open up the Word of God, the sin of withholding is literally from Genesis all the way through. And you've heard these stories, but you haven't heard them in the context of the sin of withholding. And when you see it, you will never forget it.